Trip to the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park, which is the largest national park in the U.S. On arrival, I visited the Anchorage Museum, which was delightful and too much to be seen in one day. The 7 of us got on a small plane and flew to McCarthy. The flight was amazing, but was only a taste of what was going to happen. This is the McCarthy Airport. From there, it was a short drive to Kennecott, sometimes spelled with an I replacing the second E. The scenery was magnificent, and this was the hotel we were staying in, and the view from the hotel was mind-numbingly beautiful and changed regularly. Most of the time it was cloudy or bright sunny with only intermittent light rain. The weather was spectacular and the bugs were non-existent. Kennecott is famous for its copper mine, which was discovered in 1900. Copper mine deserves a little bit of a story. In the summer of 1900, 2 prospectors saw green at the top of the mountain, ultimately discovering that it was copper, one of the richest deposits in the world. The problem was it was in the middle of nowhere and they needed to build a railroad from the coast across the mountains, the rivers, and glaciers. Ultimately, they got funding from J.P. Morgan and the Guggenheim family. They had to disassemble a steamship, carry it over the mountains from Valdez, and reassemble it on the Copper River. Use sled dogs, horses, steamships. And in 1911, 10 days after the railroad was completed, it was filled with $250,000 worth of copper. And that was the beginning of an empire. The pictures above are the front view of the ore extraction facility and the side view of the ore extraction facility, which was built into the side of the mountain. Train cars entered the opening in the bottom center, and the ore was dumped into the train cars. Next, we hiked up the right edge of the Kennecott and Root Glacier, as you see above. This is the debris field of the Latimer Range, showing the different types of dirt which were washed down by the glacier when it was on different types of soil. At this point, we're on top of the glacier, getting our crampons on, and here we are walking on the glacier. Now we're going to get into a smaller plane and fly from McCarthy down to our backcountry getaway in a smaller plane. It took 3 plane loads to get us to our destination and transport all the equipment, and 9 of us. We're approaching the airfield, which is off in the distance. And this is a video of the plane actually landing on the dried lake bed, and then the pilot turns to the left 180 degrees to get to the beginning of the runway and lets us off. Sometimes after the planes land, they're not properly aligned, so we all had to push the plane to turn it into the proper alignment so it could take off. The pilot told me that they typically fly 5 to 7 flights a day into the backcountry, picking people up and dropping groups off. And they keep the groups relatively spread apart, so it's unlikely you're going to run into anybody in the backcountry. The noise you hear in the background are the katabatic winds, which are winds that blow off the glacier, and the area funnels the wind, so it is very windy. You will see sometimes the image jump in or jump out. The iPhone in video mode has 3 magnifications, 0.5, 1, and 2.5, and that's when things changed. So now it just jumped to 2.5. I think I might have forgotten to mention that the lake you see, Iceberg Lake, no longer exists. We landed on the lake bed, and in 2000 the lake undermined the glacier and drained itself completely. So here we are gathering all our supplies and heading into the backcountry for a 4-day, 3-night stay in the middle of nowhere. After hiking about 2 miles with our backpacks that range between 50 and maybe 60 or 70 pounds, we arrive at our base camp and start to set up our tents. This is my one-man tent. Anna and Mike ensured that we were extremely well fed, and I suspect nobody lost weight on the trip. So to reorient you, we landed at the White Arrow, a lake which no longer exists, hiked to our base camp circled in green. The following day, we were going to do our big hike from the base camp up to what we called REI Pass. It's a pass that has no name. It was a difficult hike, at least for me, but it was spectacularly beautiful, with meadows, mountains, snow, river crossings. It was just amazing. Partly up the mountain pass we're climbing, we stopped for lunch at a spectacular venue. Ultimately, we reached the pass, and Olivia claimed the prize as the first person to the top. After summiting the mountain pass, I had a moment of cognitive clarity and decided I no longer needed the stressful existence that I was living, and it was time to retire from my career, which I loved immensely. For me, the trek down was difficult. Climbing over the boulders on steep incline, even with walking sticks, was treacherous. It was clearly worth all the effort, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who thought they could handle the trip. One of the most appreciated luxuries of the trip was the fact that we had an 8-person tent which easily fit 9 of us in chairs, and when it got windy or chilly, we were able to have meals in comfort. For the hike on day 3, one group chose to go to a glacier and the other group chose to go south. I was in the latter group. We walked past the landing strip on the right-hand side where there was a river that eroded away. Again, several crossings, but there was a spectacular flower field along the entire length of our walk. Many of us were hoping to see a grizzly in the wild for the first time, and we came upon bear, scat, and prints, and did see a grizzly at about 200 yards. We didn't feel threatened in any way.
Okay, that's our bear. Grazing on that piece of land. I'm going to zoom out. Just set down so you can see how far away he is. He's looking at us.
The bear was huge, and for that reason we thought it was a male. He seemed very comfortable laying down to take a nap and paid little attention to us. Ultimately, we got to a mountain pass overlooking a glacier lake. It was quite spectacular. You can see the glacier off in the left and people on the far left. That's where we had lunch. The hike down was a bit treacherous again, but more beautiful wild flowers, indescribably spectacular. More bear prints, more flowers, and another bear sighting. This was undoubtedly the same bear we saw the first time, as he was within 100 yards of the prior location. again about 200 yards. We headed back to our base camp, having done 2 spectacular hikes over 2 days. On the following morning, we packed up all our stuff, tents and everything, hiked over to the dried lake bed, and waited for the airplane to arrive and bring us back to civilization, or at least to McCarthy, Alaska. Our return flight took us directly over REI Pass, which was the location where I had my moment of cognitive clarity, and the views from the plane were amazing. After landing in MacArthur, we saw a moose on the way from the airport, and we visited the potato for several delicious meals, and then had a shower for the first time in 4 days. The following day we went pack rafting, in which we put a kayak, which is inflatable, into a backpack, carry it to a lake adjacent to a mud field, and then kayak on glacier water. In the above photo, you can see that the glacier is quite thick with a debris layer on top on which plants are growing. It truly was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. REI is to be congratulated on organizing it so efficiently. The tour guides were fantastic. I thank Hannah and Mike, and the group of people were just fantastic to hang out with.